Wikipedia, right to keep and bear arms. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Bear arms redirects here. For other uses, see bear arms. Disambiguation. See also right to keep and bear arms in the United States. Overview of gun laws by nation and gun control. The right to keep and bear arms, often referred to as the right to bear arms, is the people's right to possess weapons, arms for their own defense. Only few countries recognize people's right to keep and bear arms and protect it on statutory level, and even fewer protect the right on a constitutional level. The background. In Old English, beran, past tense bear means to bear, bring forth or produce, to endure or sustain or to wear. The Bill of Rights 1689 allowed Protestant citizens of England to have arms for their defense suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law, and restricted the ability of the English crown to have a standard army or to interfere with Protestants' right to bear arms when Papists were both armed and employed contrary to law, and established that Parliament, not the Crown, could regulate the right to bear arms. Sir William Blackstone wrote in the 18th century that the right to have arms was auxiliary to the natural right of resistance and self-preservation, subject to suitability and allowance by law. The term arms, as used in the 1600s, the term refers to the process of equipping for war. It is commonly used as a synonym for weapon. Inclusion of this right in a written constitution is uncommon. In 1875, 17% of constitutions including a right to bear arms. Since the early 20th century, the proportion has been less than 9% and falling. In their historical survey and comparative analysis of constitutions dating back to 1789, Tom Ginsburg and colleagues identified only 15 constitutions in 9 countries that had ever included an explicit right to bear arms. Almost all of these constitutions have been in Latin America, and most were from the 19th century. Generally, where modern constitutions refer to arms at all, the purpose is to allow the government to regulate their own use or to compel military service, not to provide a right to bear them. Constitutions which historically guaranteed a right to bear arms are those of Bolivia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Libya, Mexico, Nicaragua, and the United States of America. Nearly all of the Latin American examples were modeled on that of the United States. At present, out of the world's nearly 200 constitutions, still three still include a right to bear arms: Guatemala, Mexico, and the United States. Of these three, only the last does not include explicit restrictive conditions. Americas, Guatemala. While protecting the right to keep arms, Guatemala Constitution specifies that the right extends only to weapons not prohibited by law. Honduras, although not explicitly protected by the Constitution, the right to bear and the right to keep and bear arms is conditionally guaranteed by Honduran statute law. Mexico, see also gun politics in Mexico. Mexican Constitution of 1857 first included right to be armed. It is in its first version, the right was defined in similar terms as it is in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. A new Mexican Constitution of 1917 relativized rel, relativized relativized the right, stating that its utilization must be in line with local police regulations. Another change was included in 1971 Constitution. Since then, Mexicans have the right to be armed only within their home, and further utilization of that right is subject to statutory statute statutory authorization, federal law. United States, main article: right to keep and bear arms in the United States. Europe, Seychelles Republic. Main article: gun laws in the Seychelles Republic. In the Seychelles Republic, every citizen that meets conditions laid down in Act Number 119/2002 Cole has a right to have firearms license issued and can then obtain a firearm. Holders of D exercise of profession and E self-defense licenses, which are also shall issue, can carry up to 2 concealed firearms for protection. The right to be armed is statutorily protected. However, it is not listed in the Constitution. A proposal to have right to keep and bear arms included in the Constitution was entered in the Czech Parliament in December 2016. The proposal was approved by vote of 139 to 9 on 28 June 2017 by the Chamber of Deputies. It later failed to reach necessary support in Senate, where only 28 out of 59 senators present supported it. Constitutional majority being 36 votes. The proposal is expected to be submitted again in the Parliament after the 5 and 6 October 2018 Senate elections. Switzerland. Further information: gun laws in Switzerland. The Swiss have a statutory right to bear arms under Article 3 of the 1997 Weapons Act. Switzerland practices universal conscription, which requires that all able-bodied male citizens keep fully automatic firearms at home in case of a call-up. Every male between the ages of 20 and 34 is considered a candidate for conscription into the military, and following a brief period of active duty will commonly be enrolled in the militia until age or in inability to serve ends his obligation. Until December 2009, these men were required to keep their government issued selective fire combat rifles and semi-automatic handguns in their homes as long as they were enrolled in the armed forces. Since January 2010, they have had the option of depositing their personal firearm at a government arsenal. Until September 2007, soldiers received 50 rounds of government issued ammunition in a sealed box for storage at home. After 2007, only about 2,000 specialist troops are allowed to keep the ammunition at home. In a referen- ref- referendum in February 2011, voters voters rejected a citizens initiative that would have obliged obliged members of the armed services to store their rifles and pistols on military compounds, and required that privately owned firearms be registered. United Kingdom. See also firearms policy in the United Kingdom. See also self defense in English law. See also offensive weapons. An offensive weapon is a tool made, adapted, or intended for the purpose of inflicting mental or physical injury upon another person. Offensive weapon, UK. The right to keep and bear arms is not legally or constitutionally protected in the United Kingdom. While citizens may possess certain firearms on an appropriate license, most handguns, automatic, and center fire semi automatic weapons are illegal to possess without special proviso. The English Bill of Rights 1689 allowed that the subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defense suitable to their conditions and as allowed by law. The first serious control on firearms was established with the passing of the Firearms Act 1920. Since the passing of gun control laws, the UK has one of the lowest firearm death rates among developed nations, with 0.2 deaths per 1,000 compared to 10.2 in the US. Since 1953, it has been a criminal offense in the United Kingdom to carry a knife, with the exception of non-locking folding knives with a cutting edge of 3 inches, 7.62 centimeters or less, or any offensive weapon in a public place without lawful authority or reasonable excuse. The cutting edge of a knife is separate to the blade length. The only manner in which an individual can carry arms is on private property or any property which the public does not have a lawful right of access, as the law only creates the offense when it occurs in public. Example, e.g., a person's own home, private land, the area in a shop where the public have no access, etc. Furthermore, Section 141 Criminal Justice Act 1988 specifically lists all offensive weapons that cannot technically be owned, even on private property, by way of making it illegal to sell, trade, hire, etc., an offensive weapon to another person. Furthermore, the law does not allow an offensive weapon or ordinary item intended or adapted as an offensive weapon to be carried in public before the threat of violence arises. This would only be acceptable in the eyes of the law if the person armed themselves immediately proceeding or during an attack in a public place. This is known as a weapon of opportunity or instantaneous arming. Other Sharia law. Under Sharia law, there is an intrinsic freedom to own arms. However, in times of civil strife or internal violence, this right can be temporarily suspended to keep peace and prevent harm, as mentioned by Imam Ash-Shatibi in his works on Maqasid Ash-Sharia, the intents and purposes of Sharia. Citizens not practicing Islam are prohibited from bearing arms and are required to be protected by the Islamic State's military, the state for which they pay the jizya. In exchange, they do not need to pay the zakat. Yemen. There is no right to keep and bear arms in Yemen, but firearms are both easily and legally accessible. Gun violence and the politics of the right to bear arms. This section contains weasel words, vague phrases that often accompanies biased or unverifiable information. Such statements should be clarified or removed. Legal restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms are usually put in place by legislators because they believe that they will reduce gun-related violence. Their actions are frequently the result of grassroots pressure for such controls. The Brady Snowdrop campaigns and the Million Mom March are recent examples of campaigns calling for tighter restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms. Accident statistics are hard to obtain, but much data is available on the issue of gun ownership and gun-related deaths. The United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institution UNICRI have made comparisons between countries with different levels of gun ownership and investigated the correlation between gun ownership levels and gun homicides and between gun ownership levels and gun suicides. A strong correlation is seen in both. During the 1989 and 1992 international crime surveys data on gun ownership in 18 countries have been collected, on which who data on suicide and homicide committed with guns and other means are also available. The results presented the results presented in a previous chapter, based on the 14 countries surveyed during the first ICS and on rank correlations, Spearman's RHO suggested that gun ownership may increase suicides and homicides using firearms. While it may not reduce suicides and homicides with other means, in the present analysis, four additional countries covered by the 1992 ICS only have been included, and Persian's correlation coefficients R have been used. The results confirm those presented in the previous study. UNICRI also investigated the relationship between gun ownership levels and other forms of homicide or suicide to determine whether high gun ownership added to or merely displaced other forms of homicide or suicide. They reported that widespread gun ownership has not been found to reduce the likelihood of fatal events committed with other means. Thus, people do not turn to knives and other potentially lethal instruments less often when more guns are available. But more guns usually mean more victims of suicide and homicide. Speculating on possible causes, the researchers concluded that all we know is that guns do not reduce fatal events due to other means, but that they go along with more shootings. Although we do not know why exactly this is so, we have a good reason to suspect guns to play a fatal role in this. The research reporter found that guns were the major cause of homicides in 3 of the 14 countries it studied: Northern Ireland, Italy, and the United States, although the data seem to indicate that reducing the availability of one significant type of firearms, leads to reductions both in gun crimes and gun suicides, and in overall crimes and overall suicides. The author did caution that reducing the number that reducing the number of guns in the hands of the private citizen may become a hopeless task beyond a certain point, citing the American example. In contrast to the 1993 study, however, a more recent study by UNICRI researchers from 2001 examined the link between household gun ownership and overall homicide, overall suicide, as well as gun homicide and gun suicide rates among 21 countries. Significant relations between household gun ownership and rates of gun suicides for both genders, and gun homicide rates involving female victims were found. There were no significant correlations detected for total homicide and suicide rates, as well as gun homicide rates involving male victims. And so yeah, this is Wikipedia, the Free Encyclopedia, wikipedia.org, and this stuff is subject to change. So go look it up for up to date stuff.